Today I'm discussing how I organize my physical media collection, and I'll be sharing with all of you the method to my madness. So let's rock this. Hi everyone, how you doing? Welcome back. I'm Fuzz. So I've been asked a number of times out there by viewers how I organize my collection. And I thought it would be a good idea for a back to basics video because I know so many new collectors out there are contemplating how you would like to organize your collection. So new collectors often tend to take an interest in how others organize their collections as well. Now, I got to give you a heads up here. I would not necessarily consider myself a role model for collection organization. I tend to take a little bit more unorthodox approach than I think many other collectors do out there. And of course, this back to basics is not just for new collectors. I think we can all take an interest in these kinds of things because we're all different in how we like to express our individuality with our collections. We all have our own ways of doing things, so I'm going to share with you guys today how I like to do things, the organizational style that works best for me and makes me happy. Now, I'm actually going to be moving around here a little bit. I'm going to be actually getting up and standing. I'm going to use a couple different camera angles here to put this presentation together. I'll even be behind the camera here in a little bit so that I can, go handheld on the collection, zoom in on the collection a little bit, and get a little bit more detailed in my presentation. A number of people watching the channel have pointed out to me that they're a little perplexed in trying to figure out how exactly I organize my collection, just from like what you can see back here, right? So I thought it'd be fun to actually kind of break it down for you here, because I do have my own custom way of doing things that doesn't always line up with what I see many other collectors doing with their collections. And I wouldn't fault anyone for being a little bit confused when looking at my collection behind me and trying to figure out what the fuck is going on with it. For one thing, in many of my videos, especially the older ones where I was sitting back a little bit further and closer to my collection, in many of my videos you can only see a portion of my collection anyway, so you don't get the whole picture from just what you see back here, right? At first glance, it might actually look like there's not a whole lot of structure to my collection, but I can assure you there is a method to my madness. And, I do have my own custom organizational system where I prioritize the attributes that I care about the most, right? And those attributes are not always the same ones that other collectors care about the most or prioritize the highest. The way I group my titles together may seem a little bit funky, but it makes perfect sense to me and it absolutely works for me. And here's the thing, believe it or not, I can actually be pretty particular about certain things. But in many ways, my organizational structure is actually pretty loose and flexible, and that's by design, because I want to be able to move things around easily, right? And not be locked into any particular positions on my shelves for any given titles. And because of that, there are some things that I'm just not personally all that picky about, even though I know others are. Now, before I get into the meat of the video here, we do have a couple new Fuzz Club members that I want to give a quick shout out to. First off, Jorden Tetuan just became a member of the Fuzz Club. Jorden, thank you so much. I hope I got your last name right there. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but Jordan's been doing a lot of commenting, and I've really enjoyed chatting with him thus far. Jorden, thank you so much for becoming a Fuzz Club member. I really appreciate that extra support of the channel. Means a lot to me. Likewise for Daniel Marks, who also became a Fuzz Club member just a few days ago. Daniel, thank you so much. It's great to see you here in Fuzzland. Really appreciate your comments, and I look forward to chatting with you as well a little bit more moving forward. But Daniel and Jorden, both of you, thank you so much for becoming Fuzz Club members. Your support means the world to me. You guys are awesome, and I look forward to chatting with you guys more in the future. So thanks so much. And if any of you would like to know more about the Fuzz Club, there is a link in the description below. Just click on that, or you can click on the join button below as well, and it'll bring up all the membership information for you. All right, so I thought it'd be good to start this whole thing off with me talking about some things that I don't do in terms of how I organize my collection. Things that I don't do, or things that I don't emphasize in my collection organization that I've noticed a lot of other collectors do. That seemed like a pretty good starting point because some of these things are big things that I see a lot of other collectors do out there. It's very common, and so I don't know, some of you might think that my approach is a little bit more unorthodox, a little less organized. That's fine. So let me get into some of the big things that I don't like to do that are very popular among collectors to do. And the first one's a big one here that I see a lot of other collectors do, and that is alphabetizing the collection. I do not like to alphabetize. In fact, I hate it. I hate it. I find alphabetizing to be far too limiting in, for what I want to do with my collection, because it doesn't allow me the flexibility to put the titles on my shelves in the places that I want to put them, right? I'm kind of stuck having to stick the titles wherever they happen to fall in the alphabet on the shelf, and that just doesn't work for me. I like to display my favorite titles in what I call prime shelf real estate. In fact, I'll even show you what I'm talking about. Usually prime shelf real estate, when I'm talking about like the best spots on the shelves, I'm talking about the spots where your eyes are immediately drawn to that location, right? So in my case, and I'll kind of re-emphasize this once I stand up and start going through here, but usually these top few shelves here are prime shelf real estate, right? And I like to display my favorites on the best shelves, on the most prominent, most visible shelves. When you're alphabetizing, you're stuck having to put those titles at a specific location on your shelves. And it might not be the location that you want those titles to be displayed in, but that's where they fall in the alphabet. So you're kind of stuck with that, right? That's just far too rigid for my own personal comfort. Another thing I don't do is I don't separate my formats. Now keep in mind, I largely collect just Blu-ray and 4K. I don't really even collect DVDs anymore. I do have a relative handful of DVDs, maybe about 50 DVDs that I actually keep on a different shelf on the other side of the camera there. But those are the only ones I've kept around for posterity. All my other old DVDs are all packed up in storage at a different location. They're not even in this house. So I don't even give those DVDs the time of day anymore. So I only collect Blu-rays and 4K discs, and I know a lot of collectors like to keep their 4Ks separate from their Blu-rays. I don't like to do that. I mix them all in together, right? Because, well, there's a bunch of reasons for that, but essentially I don't want to have one more attribute that I have to break my collection down into. I've got other ways that I like to organize my collection. And if I were to separate formats, Blu-ray from 4K and keep them in different locations, it would mess with some of my other custom organizational attributes that I like to use. So I don't keep my 4Ks and Blu-ray discs separate from each other. They're all thrown in the mix together. Also, another thing that I don't like to do that a lot of other collectors like to do is they like to have a certain amount of uniformity, right? Have the spines matching, put all the slipcovered editions in one place, put all the steelbooks in another place. Maybe you just don't use the slipcovers at all because you don't like some titles having slipcovers and some not. So you take all the slipcovers off and just have just the nice sleek black cases by themselves, right? I mean, there's all kinds of ways that people approach this stuff. But uniformity has never been a huge priority for me. And you can tell that just from looking at stuff behind me, right? I've got titles without slipcovers next to titles with slipcovers. I've got steelbooks mixed in with slipcovers and box sets and whatnot. So yeah, I just don't play that game. I mean, don't get me wrong. Uniformity is cool. I can understand the aesthetic appeal of trying to make everything nice and uniform, putting all your boutique labels together, like all your Arrow Video titles together and all your Vinegar Syndrome titles together and Scream Factory titles together or whatnot. I get that. I understand the appeal of the aesthetics there, but it's just a really low priority for me personally, right? Because there are other custom groupings and custom organizational attributes that I prefer to use and that I give a lot higher priority to than the uniformity of the collection. So those are three big things that I don't do that other collectors do, all right? I don't alphabetize, I don't separate 4Ks and Blu-rays, and I don't care about uniformity and everything looking perfect. All right, so now that you know what I don't like to do, here's a little summary of how I like to organize my collection, right? And I'm just going to kind of give you the nuts and bolts up front, and then I'll switch camera angles and whatnot and get into this stuff in more detail here. But the first thing I like to do is I like to separate my titles by genre. Okay, so I have my collection split into about 4 different main genre categories, right? And I split up my titles into those 4 different genre categories. And then within each genre, I group films together according to my own custom preferences, right? So I'm talking about my favorite subgenres and themes, favorite directors, favorite franchises, and favorite actors. Those are the things I tend to prioritize when I'm organizing my collection and grouping titles together. All right, so I'm about to get up on my feet here, get a little bit more active, have a little bit more fun with this, you guys. Also, a quick note, just something for you guys to be on the lookout for later in the video. Once I get to the handheld portion of the video, where I'm on the other side of the camera, kind of, you know, going freeform, I'm also going to show you guys a little bit of some of the decorating I've done in this room, in the, you know, above my collection. I've started to kind of develop a little bit of a shrine to movies above my collection. I got some cool artwork that I wanted to show you guys as well. So once I get to that portion of the video, I will be also showing you, it's not meant to be a room tour. It's not meant to be a room tour. I'm not showing you the whole room, but I am showing you a significant chunk of my collection, and I figured I may as well show you some of the art surrounding the collection while I'm at it. All right, so without any further ado, let's dive in a little bit deeper here. All right, so this is the macro view, right? And I'd like to stand up here, but I'm a little too tall. So it's going to cut off my head, but just bear with me. We're not going to be on this camera angle for too long. I just kind of wanted to give you the, well, like I said, macro view, right? And yeah, keep in mind, I'm totally going freeform here, right? I don't have any kind of script or notes for the rest of the video, all right? So bear with me if I mangle words, if I stumble over my words or screw something up. That's just the way it is. I don't normally go freeform like this, so this is actually quite unusual for me to do this. But all right, so this is my main storage unit, right? Most of my movies are located here. I do have movies over there and some other titles over there as well. I have a couple storage units built into the wall on the other side of the camera. So this isn't all my movies or all my titles, but most of my movies are located here. And for our purposes today, I figured this would probably be good enough, right? You don't need to see the whole room. Okay, so I bought this storage unit a few years ago. The idea was that it would be able to hold hopefully all of my movies. Of course, when I got it, my collection was a lot smaller than it is now. So this thing is now almost completely filled up, and I've actually had to move titles over there because I'm actually running out of room again. But when I got this, it seemed like the perfect solution at the time. And my thinking with this was that I was going to separate this unit into multiple genres, okay? But if you look closely, you can see this storage unit is actually separated into 4 different columns, right? So you can't, I don't know if you can really see the divider lines, but there's one right there. So this is one column. This is a second column, another divider right here. This is the third column, and then this is the fourth column, right? And so when I first got this, my thinking was each column was going to be its own genre, right? A separate genre for each column. So my thinking was this will be horror on this side, this will be sci-fi, this will be action, and then the final column over here would be miscellaneous. Anything that doesn't fit squarely in my horror, action, or sci-fi sections would go in a miscellaneous section. So, you know, dramas, comedies, slice of life movies, other things like that, right? And I should note how I determine which genre a title goes into, right? Because I'm pretty loose. Like I indicated earlier, I'm very loose and flexible with this stuff. So when I talk about the horror genre, what I really mean is anything that's horror or horror adjacent, right? When I talk about the action genre, I'm talking about action or anything that could be considered action adjacent, right? So take something like thrillers, for example, right? Thrillers is a tricky one because depending on the thriller, I think you can make the case that it's either adjacent to horror or adjacent to action. So some thrillers I will put in my horror section if I think they lean more towards horror, like Basic Instinct or Dress to Kill. Other thrillers that are more, I don't know, they're not necessarily horror adjacent, but they are very suspenseful, maybe even have a couple little intense action shots or scenes in them, then those I'll put in my action section. Even though it's more of a thriller and more of a like a suspenseful, dramatic thriller, if I think it is closer to action than horror, then I'll put it in my action section. What I don't do is keep a completely separate genre for thrillers, right? I just figure, well, thrillers are close enough to either horror or action, so I'll just stick them in those genres. And that's what I do. So that's what I mean when I say I'm pretty flexible about this stuff, right? It doesn't have to be perfect for me. So anyway, when I first got this, like I said, the idea, I had this perfect ideal that each column would be perfect, its own little genre, and I wouldn't need to alter anything beyond that. Well, that's not exactly the way it worked out, you know? Because what I found is that I ended up buying far more horror and action titles than I was buying sci-fi titles during this time. So my action and horror sections are a lot larger than my sci-fi section, right? My sci-fi section hasn't really grown that much compared to horror and action, right? So I had to kind of modify how I do things, and this is where it gets a little bit funky. All right, so let me explain where the boundaries are now for these genres, okay? So take this first column. This first column is all horror, okay? This is all horror. And then the horror continues in this second column. So right up here, I've got like my John Carpenter films and Halloween films, right? So horror continues on down to about there, right where Candyman is there. That's like the end of my horror section. Now, I'm in the process of converting this entire shelf to horror. So this is the end of the horror section, and then the sci-fi section starts for the rest of this shelf, and then everything down here is sci-fi, and then sci-fi continues into this next column. Remember, there's a big divider here. Sci-fi continues to about right here, right? So the sci-fi section's actually pretty small, you know, compared to action and horror. So my sci-fi goes from what? Here, down to about there. And then everything else is action. Action starts here, all the way down here, and all the way down the next column. This is all action. So you're probably wondering what happened to the miscellaneous category. It's around. It's just that I ran out of room on this unit. So my miscellaneous section is now on the other side of the camera, out of view from you guys. You can't see it. But there's probably only about, I don't know, 100, 125 movies in that section. Oh, and for those wondering, if you're wondering like how many titles I have total, just in terms of like movies and well, music on Blu-ray, I have about 1,200 titles, I think now, give or take, probably around 1,200 titles. I mean, I consider that somewhat modest, right? I mean, compared to someone, if you've only got a couple hundred titles, maybe 1,200 seems like a lot. But when I look at some guys that got, you know, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 movies, you know, 7,000, 8,000 movies, then, you know, 1,200 seems fairly humble and modest by comparison. So anyway, my miscellaneous section is on the other side here. I don't have that many non-action sci-fi and horror titles. You know, I have some, but not a whole lot. I mean, I'm very much into curating, and the genres that are here, those are my favorite genres. That's my jam, right? I don't really get into other genres nearly as much. So, but yeah, the miscellaneous section had to get moved over there. I ran out of room on this unit. And then if you're wondering what makes up the other titles, I do have a bunch of music and documentary titles on a different storage unit over here, also out of view of the camera. And that's like music concert films on Blu-ray, music documentaries, film documentaries. I have a whole section for that, and that's on the other side of the camera out of view. But again, for today, we're just talking about my action, horror, and sci-fi section. And that's essentially how I organize by genre, right? But now we're gonna get in, zoom in on these titles a little bit more, and you can see a little bit more details of how I group things together, right? So let's do that right now. By the way, if you're enjoying the content on this channel, do me a favor and please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you do, don't forget to activate that notification bell as well, so you can always be alerted when I'm posting videos that you might dig. Also, don't forget to like the video. It really does help with the algorithm and the channel's visibility out there on YouTube. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. All right, so here we are a little bit closer, and I'm going to get even closer here in just a minute. Again, the same storage unit here, right? Just from a slightly different angle. But before I get into detail on this, I wanted to show you guys some of my decorating that I've been doing in this room. And you should understand, this is not something that I have ever really done, right? I don't really do a lot of decorating in the rooms that I've been in. I've never really been into posters that much. I've never really collected posters. Occasionally I'd get something and put it up on a wall. But for the most part, I've never really been into posters that much. But once I got back into collecting with a passion, I wanted to kind of put together some kind of movie shrine above my collection. I didn't like that I didn't have any cool artwork, and I watch other YouTubers and their videos, and I'm like, man, you guys got so much cool stuff in your backgrounds, you know, cool posters, cool artwork, cool knickknacks and whatnot. I'm not someone who really collects a bunch of knickknacks at all. I just, really the only thing I collect is the actual movies themselves, right? But I figured I might be going live at some point. I might want to use this as a background for some of my videos, so I thought, you know, I should start trying to do some decorating. And what I did is I got these 8x12 metal signs, right? They're like tin signs with the movie art printed on them. So you got the Matrix there, got Fifth Element, Die Hard. This Terminator one is my one of my favorites, along with the Aliens one. I just love the artwork on these. In fact, seeing these is what made me, or what gave me the idea to do kind of like a collage here. And it's not done yet. You know, I still got blank corkboard there, as you can see. I'm not even a big fan of corkboard, but it kind of came with the house. It came with the room, and I didn't really want to mess with taking it down because, you know, it's not clear how long we're actually going to be in this house. So I just worked with what I had. But, of course, you know, James Cameron trifecta there, got the Abyss. Love the Total Recall artwork, same as my Steelbook. Check out my Heat artwork. Isn't that cool? I love that. And then, of course, we got the Thing there, another Thing poster, because we have one over there as well. And then, of course, Point Break there. Moving over here, we got, had to have Star Wars represented somehow, so I've got my little Millennium Falcon art there. And then I just love this Terminator poster. Yes, I know I need to get a frame for it. I'm terrible about this kind of stuff. I just don't think about those kinds of things. You know, I unrolled it and I stuck it up on the wall. That's what I did with some push pins, you know, but I do like this Terminator one, especially with, you know, you got Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor inside the head there. I always thought that was really cool. So I'll have to get a frame for this at some point and make it look a little nicer, because it doesn't look that great right now. But I love the art. And then, of course, there's my Skynet sign. So that's some of my artwork that I've been working on. This has all come about just in the last probably 6-7 months that I kind of added all this. So yeah, and of course there's the Terminator head and the Phantasm Sentinel Spear, Close Encounters, some other stuff as well. So, all right, so let's get back to talking about the organizing of my collection itself. Let's get into this. Okay, so let's get in a little closer here. Okay, we're on the left side of my collection, my left side here. Again, this is the horror section, the start of the horror section. So this gives you an idea of how I like to group things together. First off, you see I've got my George Romero stuff here, right? Along with the non-Romero remakes, and then the George Romero up till about Two Evil Eyes, and then that's kind of the bridge to Dario Argento, right? And then I have my entire Dario Argento collection here, and it actually carries on to the next shelf here. But yeah, so Dario Argento. Now, I said before I don't really organize things by boutique label at all, but as long as my other custom groupings are satisfied, I do like to try and group the labels together where I can, you know? So for example, you'll notice Dario Argento, I've got these Blue Underground titles all together. I've got my Arrow titles all together here. Then the lone Severin Films release, and then I've got a few Synapse Films releases there, and then just various others, right? All right, moving right along, random Arrow box set there, although not totally random because I try to keep it with other Arrow stuff wherever I can. But this is like my creature flick section, right? So starting with Tremors, I got the werewolf stuff in there. I don't have a whole lot of werewolf movies, as you can see, just a few. You know, Piranha, The Blob, Pumpkinhead, Critters, Alligator Jaws. And you got the Kindred in there, Night of the Creeps, Mimic, Ticks. And that's like the end of my creature film section. I love creature flicks. I'd like to get more actually and make this section a lot bigger. So if you have any recommendations for good creature flicks, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. But of course, there is a little bit of randomness to my collection, and I'll show you what I mean here. Moving down another shelf here, this is my Vinegar Syndrome shelf, or it's largely Vinegar Syndrome. I've got the Synapse Demons here, Lamberto Bava, which made sense that I would put it next to Lamberto Bava's A Blade in the Dark, right? And this is like the start of my little Vinegar Syndrome section. So I do sort things by label if I'm not trying to satisfy some other attribute, right? If I've got a bunch of standalone releases here by the same label, I do try to put them all together, you know, especially Vinegar Syndrome. It's nice to have them all displayed together with their beautiful slip covers and everything. And that goes right up to about Existenz here, which starts my Cronenberg collection, right? Which I don't have a whole lot of Cronenberg, just these films, but that's my Cronenberg collection. Let's see what else. Going down to the next shelf, more Vinegar Syndrome here. And then the very last title on my Vinegar Syndrome shelf in the horror section is TCM2, right? Which then, of course, starts my Tobe Hooper section, my small little Tobe Hooper section. And then we do have some randomness here, you know, some random standalone stuff. Phantasm. Down here, got my Wes Craven collection, which is rather small. And then some Giallo. Keep all the Giallo films together, or Italian horror, most of the Italian horror together. I'm not, maybe not all, but a lot of it I keep together. And then, you know, a lot of random standalone stuff, right? The Omen set, the Evil Dead movies, Friday the 13th down there. So, yeah, just a lot of random standalone releases there. But, all right, so that's horror. And then we go over to the next column, right, where I have my Halloween collection. You know, I said I don't care about uniformity that much, but I do like uniformity when I can have it, right? I had to get all these Scream Factory releases, the nice, you know, hard box sets. Had to get them all. And I just love having them there. Of course, I like the David Gordon Green movies as well. And that, of course, goes right into my John Carpenter collection, right? Which I think I might actually tweak this and move a few things around once I'm done with this video. But you can see I got all my John Carpenter stuff there. That's still horror. This is the sci-fi section here. So I think what I might end up doing is putting a few of these John Carpenter sci-fi films over on this side and using up the extra for some other horror titles. I'm not sure what I'm going to do there, but I'm thinking about still rearranging. I'm always thinking about rearranging things. And that's part of the reason I like to organize my collection this way, because I love having the flexibility to move things around, right? All right, so John Carpenter and Halloween, next shelf. The horror continues. I've got a little vampire section here, right? And then some more standalone horror. Like I said, wherever possible, I grouped a few Scream Factory titles there together. I try to group things together by label within the genres and within my other like custom groupings. It just doesn't always work out that way, and it's not the highest priority attribute for me. I think I need to put House by the Cemetery somewhere else. I don't think I like it right there. Put it down with the Italian horror, I think. But anyway, you know, and there's little things I do to associate films with each other. Like, for example, you know, I got Invasion of the Body Snatchers there, right? And I put that next to another Donald Sutherland film that is often considered a horror film or horror adjacent film, Don't Look Now, right? And then because of Kiefer Sutherland, I put Flatliners next to the Donald Sutherland movies, right? So it all has a logic in my mind. Of course, got a few Brian De Palma films there. Unfortunately, I had to split my Brian De Palma collection up between a couple different genres because I associate Dress to Kill and The Fury and Carrie with horror, but other films like Blowout, I tend to associate more with action, or, you know, at least somewhat adjacent to action. All right, moving right along. So that's horror as well. And then the horror section, like I said, ends right about there at Candyman. And that's just because it's a work in progress, right? This whole shelf will ultimately become horror, and I'll shift the sci-fi titles down or something. But little Roland Emmerich stuff there, disaster movies, and then we get into a little Spielberg there, of course, E.T. and Close Encounters, Minority Report, Jurassic World. And then what I've done here, and remember, this side is actually my action section at this point. This side is now sci-fi, right? Because sci-fi begins on this shelf. So I split up my Bruce Willis collection to reflect that, right? So on the sci-fi side, I've got Looper and Fifth Element and Surrogates. But on the action side, I've got the Die Hard movies and Red and 16 Blocks and Hostage, right? So that's kind of how I do things. It makes sense to me, you know. Of course, if you have to move things around, it is a little tricky when you've got an actor's grouping kind of split between two different genres, but, you know, that's just part of the deal. All right, so I keep going down. I'm in sci-fi here, right? I keep going down. More standalone sci-fi titles, right? Various stuff. Of course, got my DC comic movies there. I definitely am partial to DC. I like the DC superhero movies a lot more than the Marvel ones. So I put those right there. Moving down, more standalone stuff, right? Just various sci-fi releases. My Marvel stuff is down there near the bottom because I'm not a big Marvel fan. So that's why I've got it separate from my DC stuff. I mean, I like Marvel, but I kind of got burned out on it and have not really been in the mood to watch any Marvel stuff. So I've just got it down. Usually stuff that I don't watch as much, I throw down at the very bottom. Or if I'm not interested in it at the time, you know, it ends up down kind of at the bottom shelf. So, all right, so where are we at here? All right, we did a horror section, and we started sci-fi. All right, hope the me moving the camera around isn't fucking with you guys too much. Hopefully this isn't too distracting, but all right, fully in sci-fi here. Well, sci-fi horror if we're talking Event Horizon, but all my sci-fi, Star Wars, Star Trek, Planet of the Apes, got some RoboCop action here, Matrix, sci-fi continues, and these, you know, these top shelves, prime real estate territory, right? All my favorites I usually like to have on the top few, you know, 3 or 4 shelves, just because those are, you know, those are usually at eye level or pretty close to eye level. They're the positions on the shelves that stick out the most. Like you know, when you walk into a room and you look at your shelves, your eyes automatically go to kind of the center and the top few shelves, right? So I like to be able to display my favorite movies on my favorite shelves, right? Prominent positions of display. So, you know, got some Ridley Scott here, right? And then got my James Cameron stuff in there, which then, of course, merges right into Arnold because, you know, James Cameron and Arnold, right? So I decided to start my Arnold section from there with Running Man and Total Recall and Predator. I actually continue the Arnold section over here in the action section. Sorry about my finger getting in the way there. So, you know, True Lies and Raw Deal, Conan, Eraser, right? But I'll come back to that here in just a second. So yeah, Arnold starts there. And then that's the end of the sci-fi section. I guess technically Armageddon would probably be the end of the sci-fi section if we consider that sci-fi. But then we get into my action section, which is the remainder of the display unit, right? So that's my Tony Scott section there. Okay, well, Bruce Willis and Tony Scott, you know, True Romance, Enemy of the State, Spy Game, Domino. And then what I'll do here is because Tony Scott did like 5 movies with Denzel Washington, I put the Denzel movies at the end of the Tony Scott section and then merge it right into my Denzel section, right? So, you know, the Equalizer movies and, you know, Training Day and all these other cool ones, right? Which will, I think, go down here eventually. But now there are some Denzel movies I have that I don't consider action or thriller movies. So those are on the other shelf out of view of the camera on the other side of the room. But you get the idea of how I like to do things. Going down further here, this is my heist film section. Well, it's my small Michael Mann section. And then we get into the heist films here, Italian Job, Ambulance, Score, Ronin, Den of Thieves, Heist, right? Of course, Heat back there. So these are all my heist or heist adjacent films. And I also got a little Nicolas Cage in there too, kind of put that section in there as well. The Now You See Me movies, little Robert Redford action with the Hot Rock and Sneakers. And then I put the Fast and Furious movies at the end because of Fast 5. I consider it a heist movie, right? A couple of those I think you could make the case were heist movies, but all my Fast and Furious movies there. And then moving on to the next shelf, just some various random stuff, but I do try to group some things together. You know, like got Smokey and the Bandit here. I don't have a whole lot of Burt Reynolds, but I do have Deliverance. So I put those two together because Burt Reynolds is in both of them, right? Got a little Charlie Bronson here, right? And then again, wherever possible, I do try to group labels together. So you see, I have all these Kino titles here. This is like a little mini John Frankenheimer section that I'm starting. But you get the idea, a little Quentin Tarantino, of course. And then more action films, right? A lot of more standalone stuff. Got some Mel Gibson down there in the bottom left. All right, so you get the idea. All right, let's go back up here. All right, and so we're in the final column of my action section. So like I said, Arnold there, the Arnold action stuff, which then, sorry, get my finger in the way again trying to do this, which then, of course, merges right into the Jean-Claude Van Damme stuff. And then, let's see here, which then, with Black Eagle, merges into the Sho Kosugi stuff, right? So I try to put some thought into which titles go next to each other. I do actually put quite a bit of thought into that. Next shelf down, there's all my Stallone, right? Got all the Stallone stuff here, and then followed by Chuck Norris. And again, I've grouped some Kino Lorber titles together here. Chuck Norris and the American Ninja movies, a little Bruce Lee, of course. Down there, more Vinegar Syndrome, right? Well, my Keanu Reeves collection, and then followed by my Patrick Swayze collection, right in here. And then little Vinegar Syndrome action. My second Vinegar Syndrome section, this is in the action section, although it might not every title might be considered action, but whatever. That's where I keep it. It's just easiest, and I like these VSU boxes to be displayed fairly prominently. So, yeah, more Vinegar Syndrome, VSU boxes, more martial arts stuff, Tiger Cage, Sonny Chiba, of course, Cynthia Rothrock. My Walter Hill section down there, all those, well, War Games is not Walter Hill, but these are obviously Walter Hill. and going up to Southern Comfort and the Warriors there. A little more Brian De Palma. And a little bit more randomness. Of course, my Mission Impossible movies, my Bourne movies, and then some more just random placements. So that's essentially kind of gives you an idea of how I organize things. Let me back up a little bit here. So when you're looking at it, hopefully that makes a little bit more sense now. And then, like I said, on the other side of the camera, I've got some other miscellaneous titles, but this is my horror, sci-fi, and action collection right there. And hopefully that makes a little more sense now as to how I did this. So yeah, that's it. Okay, so that about wraps it up for sharing with you guys how I organize my collection. Be real curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this one. Make sure you leave me some comments down below. Oh, by the way, for anyone wondering, no movies over here, all right? This is all just music, CDs, right? Audio CDs. And I'm actually going to go over those in a different video, but it's going to be a Fuzz Club members only video, an exclusive Fuzz Club video, which I think I'll probably have out in the next couple weeks or so. But I will be going over my music collection as well. But since that's not really the main theme of this channel, I figured I'd save it as a little bonus for Fuzz Club members. But anyway, I know that my style of organizing is probably a little bit unorthodox. A lot of people look at it and go, I don't know if I could do that, because I am really loose and flexible, right? As you guys saw, there is quite a bit of randomness to my collection, right? But it's not random. Right? It's not, my organizational system is not random at all. I definitely have a very specific way that I like to do things. And it's just according to what makes sense in my brain, right? What makes sense in my mind. So yeah, I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts. I know some of you out there, especially those of you who've been collecting for a while and you already have your organizational system well established. Yeah, I realize some of you out there might even cringe a little bit, you know, seeing the way I do stuff here, because I'm not super anal about it, right? I can be particular about some things, but overall, I'm not like super anal about my collection. I like it to satisfy some basic minimum requirements, but outside of that, you know, I'm pretty flexible with it. And I like the fact that I can take those little random pockets of movies and move them around, reorganize my collection. If I get tired of looking at my collection the way it is, and I want to put things in different places, maybe I want to put my Tony Scott movies in a different section, you know? Maybe I want to put my Ridley Scott and James Cameron movies in a different place, you know? I have the flexibility to do that, right? Because of how I've organized my collection, because I do have so many little random pockets, it makes it easier to move stuff around. So that's why I did things that way. What's most important to me is being able to group the titles I want together, regardless of whether they're on 4K or Blu-ray, regardless of whether they're steelbook or slipcover or no slipcover at all. I like to be able to group my favorites together and display them in the on the best shelves, on the preferred shelves, right? Or at least my preferred shelves. So that kind of gives you guys an idea of where I'm coming from with this stuff. Make sure you leave a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. How do you like to organize your collection? Do you like to do any of the stuff that I do? Or are you more of like an alphabetizing person? Or, you know, do you keep your 4Ks separate from your Blu-rays? I'd love to hear from all of you. I'd love to hear all the different ways that you guys organize your collection. By all means, feel free to drop me some feedback down below. Always love hearing from you. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Thank you so much for watching today. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you soon.